Hi, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of Life Matters TV. People call me Tommy, and I don't really know who I am these days, but that doesn't matter. This week we're going to talk about an interesting subject about who we think we are and who we know we are. But before we do, I want to plug again. You know, we've been doing this show for, oh my gosh, almost a year now. And we're coming up on episode number 52 next week. We have a special surprise in store for you, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And in the 50 weeks that we've done so far, the 50 episodes, my gosh, you're going to find a plethora of great information and stuff out there. So if you're faced with anything that's going on in your life, I almost challenge you to go out there and dip into the Soul Guys library, the Life Matters TV library, and just see what's there. I'm sure by now that anything that comes up in life, you'll find some answer or something that you're looking for to help with things that matter in your life. So enough about the plug and the promotion. I'm going to introduce my partner, producer, director, and star of the show, David. David McLeod. Hey, David.
Well, thank you, Tommy. Wow, you promoted me. I'm now a star of the show. Wow, that's you know, I wonder if I could put that on my resume. That could really boost my ego, you know. Anyway, welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us today. It's, as Tommy said, our 51st episode, and next week we're going to be celebrating our 52nd. That's a completion of a whole year of continuous one-week free webinars, and we're going to have like a super celebration. But as Tommy says, today we're going to be talking about knowing who we are. You know, in the last couple of weeks, we've been going through this thing, the power of awareness, getting connected into the shadow a little bit, and looking at who we think we are. And now we're kind of moving into this whole place of knowing, which I think is a place of, total freedom. It's a place of actual emancipation and liberation. And, we're going to just have some fun with that whole topic and play with it and see where it goes. And as usual, if you have comments or questions or whatever, please post them in the chat box, and we'll do our best to respond to them as quickly as we can. Anyway, let's get started. So, Tommy, I heard you say at the beginning, I'm Tommy, and I really don't know who I am. Say more about that.
Well, we grow up, and we're born into this world. We're born into this physical body. We're born into, as a baby comes in, and we're given a name, we're given an identity, we're given a sex, we're given clothes, we're given education, we're given schooling, we're given, a job, we're given a vehicle to drive, we're given a shelter, hopefully, we're given all this stuff, and then that becomes who we, like we talked about last week, who we think we are.
Yeah.
And there's a truth underneath all of that, as you said, is very liberating and can really set us free. And in many practices, many of these spiritual type practices in the world, getting to that knowing is the ultimate goal.
Mm-hmm.
And there's an element of that knowing that you can't know. And this is where it gets a little slippery and tricky, and people say, I can point you there, I can show you the door, but you have to go in yourself. You have to figure it out for yourself. But the first step is to really understand that what we think we are, this solid living human being with all my name, my identity, I'm a good this, I'm a good project manager, I'm a good student, I'm a good dad, I'm a good husband, wife, sister, brother, whatever.
Or I'm a bad something or other.
Sure. Whatever it is we've identified and labeled ourselves with, or others have labeled us with, is what we think we are. So today we're going to take that thinking part of ourselves and set it aside and see what's left. Right, when we put that aside. Yeah. So I don't know, is that going in the right direction?
Yeah, that's what I had in mind. I mean, I think that the whole idea of thoughts. First off, thoughts are very powerful. They are the forms of energy that are just filled with all kinds of creative potential. I mean, and you and I have talked about this before, and we've shared it before. All you have to do is look around your environment. And pretty much anything you see, anything you lay your eyes on, some thought brought that into existence. So it's true that thought can be very, very powerful, that it can create virtually anything, especially if there's a lot of focus and attention and inspiration brought into it. But at the same time, we can be impeded by our thoughts too. And this is the part of the issue that Tommy and I want to talk about today, the fact that some of our thoughts actually hold us back. In fact, I would dare say that most of our thoughts tend to do that, because we tend to abide by the thinking of our ego mind and not listen too much to the authoritative power, the authoritative source that comes from within us. And so that's what we want to talk about today. How do we kind of unravel the mind a little bit? How do we soften the power of the mind and get ourselves more connected to that really powerful sage within?
I love your lingo. I love the words, and that's exactly the sage word. I actually use the inner sage is what we want to get to understand and get to realize. And there's a lot of different terms and words for that, which I'll talk about in a second. But before we get there, David, I want to build on the way you were going with this. Is it's almost like shifting perspectives. And somebody, and I said this before, somebody stood up in front of me once, a teacher, and said that your mind is a tool. And much like your arm or your hand, you should be able to use it when you want to and put it down when you don't. But the way most of us are conditioned and the way most of us use our brain is that it's going all the time. We don't have much control over it. And it's always running. It's always going. It's always going. But when you realize that it is a tool that you can use, a couple questions pop up. The first thing pops up is like, yay. Because if it's a tool, then I can get it under control and I can manage it and I can stop, and then I can tame it, and I can stop saying the nasty things to myself. I can stop doing the silly actions that it's doing. I can tame it. Mm-hmm. But the other aspect of that is, if it is a tool, then what's using that tool? And that's now getting down to the core of the truth of who you are.
Sounds like we should have some, Twilight Zone music here or something. That's great. Yeah, that's a good question. Who or what is using that tool? I mean, that's a great question, and we've brought this up before, and maybe we've talked about it in kind of subtle ways, but when we ask people to do the thought meditation, for example, don't worry about how many thoughts you have, just kind of sit back and notice them. Well, who's doing the noticing and who's doing the thinking? I mean, it seems like there's two different energies there. And maybe they're different, maybe they're the same. I think there's a great lesson here for us and something that we can all learn something from.
Yeah, there's a great teacher in my life right now, an Indian Swami, and he masterfully peels back the layers and talks about, and I'm not going to do this justice right now, but I'll send the link to people, about, our eyes witness things, and our mind kind of cognates what we're witnessing and what we're touching, but then there's something behind the mind that witnesses the mind, mm-hmm. And that thing you can't really see. That aspect doesn't really have thought. It's a witness. It's an observer. These are some of the words that are used to describe it. Mm-hmm. And to me, that gets when we can get back to that layer. So there's a great book that I have right now and was gifted to me, and it's called The Untethered Soul. And it talks just about this very concept of what we know, what are we, mm-hmm. at that essence, at that core, at that silence, and even thinking about it kind of isn't, it's almost like you have to just experience it,
right?
Almost be the experience or be the witness, and in there is that freedom you talked about, mm-hmm. because there's a level of awareness there that when we get to it, and maybe just catch a glimpse of it now and then, and it just wisps away, because if you try to hold on to it, it goes away. Yeah. But you're right. We're on track there, talking about that witness, the observer, right. Those are different things, right, that we're kind of taught. So so in this book, or out of these teachings, somebody recently said to me, and maybe this is in the book I'm going to read, and I'll learn this firsthand, but Um, in your mind, say hello to yourself. Just say the word hello. What hears in your mind, right?
Yeah.
If you say it out loud, your brain hears it.
Uh-huh.
If your mind says it in silence, what hears that?
Uh-huh.
That's the witness.
Yeah, very interesting. Very interesting. And I'm going to take a little bit of a tangent here, because we've been talking about freedom, we've been talking about getting away from these thoughts and so forth. And I want to just say, all right, now this is going to seem like it's completely out of thin air and has no relevance. But I have been watching the series Spartacus on Netflix. Now, of course, it's a series about a great deal of violence and almost brutality that took place during the time of the Roman Empire, and how Spartacus rose up with the slaves to try and regain their freedom. And although some of the violence doesn't really appeal to me, most of the violence doesn't appeal to me at all, the what does appeal to me, and what I found inspirational about that series, was the passion and the drive and the focus and the inspiration that these people had to find a way to free themselves. And that's the part that I think really needs to happen. So in this context, the Roman legions kind of represent your thoughts. They kind of represent the enslaving beliefs that you have that keep you from being who you really are meant to be. And it's really up to you to invoke your inner Spartacus, to rise up, say, I'm not listening to those thoughts anymore. I am not going to be kept under the heel of those thoughts anymore. I am going to be my own person. And I am going to choose what I believe, what I want to do with my life. I am going to have the passion. So that's where I want to see us go with this, Tommy. I want to see us really get people motivated to, just kind of, all right, we've got thoughts. We have thoughts, but we are not our thoughts, and we're not enslaved by them. Let's free ourselves, starting right now.
And it's a decision, right? And it's a very empowering decision. So it's almost like, and even saying that itself, because you're exactly right, you're freeing ourselves from something. We're freeing ourselves from what we think we are. We're freeing ourselves from those more of the negative, heavy stuff to start with. And we're liberating ourselves, because only you can free yourself from this. Only you can liberate yourself from this. No matter what David or I say, we're not liberating you. You've got to make that decision yourself. And you've got to hunker down and say, fucking hey, I'm doing this. I'm not going to be under the realm of this, whatever's going on in my head all the time anymore. And so you're absolutely right, David. And I love the Spartacus metaphor and analogy. And the other one that popped into my mind, if we're talking about shows and movies, is The Matrix, because that's exactly what Neo is going through. He is freeing himself from his ego, from the mind, the thought control of the mind, and the agents are the egos. The agents are those thoughts, those Agent Smith. When Agent Smith comes and piles on him in one of those movies, in the second or third movie, and they keep coming and coming and coming and coming and coming and coming and coming, and he's like, he just bursts out. He's like, I am not going to be controlled by this anymore.
Right.
I'm not going to be controlled by these nutty thoughts in my head anymore.
Yeah.
And there is so much power in just deciding, just making the choice and the decision that I want to be free from this.
Yeah, that's a great point, and you're absolutely right. In fact, I mean, everything is a choice. In fact, if we look right down at it, our only real freedom is the freedom of choice. Ultimately, what we choose determines our life. It determines our outcome. It determines how our relationships work. It determines everything. And of course, I can't make choices in isolation because I am interacting with a lot of other people. So sometimes I have to make coordinated choices with other people, and I have to kind of check in with them and see if that choice still works for me when I'm in relationship with them. But the truth of the matter is, even as I'm doing that, I'm still making a choice. So in every instant, in every moment, I have a choice to listen to my thoughts, to let them enslave me, or to say, thank you for the thought, I am in charge of my life. I have that choice in every single moment.
Yep. And to make that choice and to stick with that choice, because what you're basically doing is you're almost putting yourself on notice. Right? Because you think about this. It's your own thought all of a sudden telling you other thoughts of your brain that, you know what, you're on notice. And I'm going to start to dismantle you, or I'm going to start to, explore you, and I'm going to start to decide whether I'm going to pay attention to you or not anymore. And it can be, it's if you think about it, it can be even nuttier, because it's almost like, in order to set your whole mind straight, you have to kind of, I don't want to say fight with your mind, because that's counterproductive. But there is that point where there is a struggle, an internal struggle, a back and forth. And the old cartoons, right, with the angel on one shoulder and the devil on the other, that goes on. And it can be a battle. And maybe these movies do reflect that battle, right?
Yeah. And I think this is an interesting point that you bring up, the concept of fighting and a battle. And sometimes it may feel that way, like there's a struggle going on. But I also think that sometimes the universe just puts stuff in the way to see if you're really serious about what you say you really want and what you have chosen to do. Because, it's easy for me, for example, to say this is what I'm going to do, and then something comfy and cozy in my comfort zone comes up and says, oh yeah, that's way more fun. I think I'm going to do that today. And what happens with my dream? Well, it just slowly starts to fade away. But it was still a choice that I made. It was still a choice. The fact is, old habits are going to keep coming back. They're not going to just simply stop. It's like the more I think, the more I create these ruts, these neural pathways in my brain. And the easier it is for me to follow those thought patterns when any particular sequence of events come up. So I get into a habit of thinking a certain way. It's like driving on a road that has ruts in it. If I'm really work at it, I can get out of those ruts. But if I don't get far enough away from those ruts, it's easier for me to slip back in again. My wheels are just going to drop right back into those ruts. So it's a constant effort until it's not an effort anymore, as Tommy would very carefully say.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's a choice, but that choice is influenced by all the thoughts we've already had so far in life, everything that we bring with us. So we make a choice, but you know what? Yeah, I really want to catch that last episode of House of Cards, and I could go to meditation class, right? So how, right? It's so really setting, like you said earlier, David, setting your intention and just saying, by God, I'm doing this. Yeah. And because you really have to have that, and you really have to show up and remind yourself, I'm going to watch Life Matters this week because it helps. It helps keep me on the path. It helps get me out of that rut and keep me out of that rut.
Yeah.
Eventually, you'll get good at it, and you'll get out of the rut, and you'll take a different road. You'll make a left and take a different path, as opposed to being in that road that has ruts in it.
Absolutely.
So this happens. This happens, and I promise you, this happens. So if you feel like you're failing, or you're falling down, or you're stumbling, or you're going, oh, not again, or I'm comfortable where I was, back asleep.
Oh God, I've done that one.
So to that point, David, like, what's a way to inspire yourself? What's a way to motivate yourself? Some people say sometimes you have to have a why, a big why.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, you do have to have a big why, and part of having a big why comes back to the first question, which is, well, who am I? If I don't know who I am, then knowing what my purpose is, knowing what my big why is, that's just going to be some big vaporous cloud thing that it's really hard for me to put my finger on. When I know who I am, and by the way, we all know who we are. I'm going to say that flat out. There is no one on this planet who doesn't know who he or she is. Now, that knowledge may be impeded by all these thoughts that are going on. It may be hard to get down to that knowing, but you do know who you are. So when you get down to that and you know it, then you can get really tightly connected to your purpose. Your purpose will become clear almost instantly when you really know who you are. Then you can say, all right, if this is who I am and if this is my purpose, then I know that spending this time watching the last episode of whatever it was you said, the House of Cards or something,
House of Cards, yeah.
may not be the best use of my time right now.
Yeah.
Maybe this thing over here is far better suited to the why that I am trying to create in the world. So, and maybe I just need to relax. Maybe that's important so that I can get back to my why, and maybe that's why I should watch this show tonight. So it's something about prioritizing. You have to know what your why is, and you have to decide what's important right now.
And I'll the why you explained to me, I call that a pull why. Like it's a why I'm moving towards, something I want to attain, like that, my purpose, my mission, what really thrills me, what excites me, what I'm here to do. And so it's like I'm pulled towards that. There's also maybe a push why, and sometimes it takes this too, to look at what you want to get away from. You look at something that's bad enough, and you go, oh my God, I've got to get away from that thing. So there can be different whys, and maybe I have it because I have a push why as well. And my push why is that I watched my grandma. I went to visit her in an old folks home once, in a retirement home, and she had Alzheimer's. And once in a while, when I would visit her, in a period of talking to her, I would see from underneath all that mental confusion and all that mental darkness and all that mental shadow, I would hear her, the grandma I loved, that clear, beautiful, loving, giggling grandma that I grew up to know, would come through and say, help me, Tommy, help me out of here. And she, she wanted to get out of that place physically, but she wanted to get out of that crazy mind too. And that's what that meant to me. And that to me, as you can tell, is a pretty big why.
Yeah.
To get people out of that freaking crazy mind so they don't die like that.
Yeah.
So there's whys that you run away from, and there's whys you run towards. Find your why. Find your whys. Find something that'll motivate you and incentivize you to stick with this. And when it gets hard, or when it gets difficult, or when it gets lazy, that it'll be the fire under your butt to keep you going.
Yeah, beautiful, brother. Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And I noticed that Sarah Jane posted a comment here which seems to be really appropriate for this moment, and that is, stop thinking and start believing. And I would like to just modify that a little bit. I think stop thinking and start believing in your why. That's really what I think she's trying to say there. And because otherwise belief is just another form of thought. I think you need to decide what you're going to believe in and let yourself be focused on that. And again, every belief is just like a more solid thought that every once in a while I have to go look at my beliefs and decide if they're still valid beliefs for me. But I really do agree that knowing who you are, knowing why you're here, knowing what you're trying to get away from, knowing what you're going towards, those are key things that all of us need to know. And we're not going to find it. We're not going to find the answers to those things in the musings of our chatterbox mind. We're going to find those things down here in our heart, in our soul, in that part of ourselves that knows the absolute truth of who we really are. That's where you're going to find it.
And in order to get there, in order to start to hear that inner voice, in order to start to hear that inner sage, you have moments of this, and you know you do, when you have this gut reaction, or you just know something's the right way, the right decision. You know what that voice sounds like. You know who you sound like, the knowing of who you are. And when you have those moments, celebrate them and remember them and hang on to them, because that's part of this too, is to know, okay, you know what, maybe 95% of my day I'm caught up in the head, I'm doing my job, the mind's going, it's just linear thinking, it's what it is. But that 5%, and which is why sometimes people say, meditation is so damn important, is because you get a little space, you get a little quiet, and that noise, and in that quiet, and in that silence, and in that space is where you're going to hear your truth. It's where you can hear yourself. It's where you can feel the right answers.
Yeah.
It's where all these great things like intuition and insight and intelligence really reside, is in that space, is in that silence, is in that quiet. So just giving yourself the opportunity to have just a few minutes of that a day, 5 to 10 minutes a day of trying to still the mind just a little bit, Say, hey, you, shush, quiet, shush, quiet.
Yeah.
and just reside in that little piece
Yeah.
will carry you so far and give you so much strength and energy and power to continue the work.
Right. Yeah, I think that, as you say, going into that quiet space, part of the key to do that, I think, is to just simply allow yourself to be present to whatever is happening right now. Don't worry about whether you're sitting in a proper pose, or whether you got your hands in a namaste, or you got that special mudra, or whether you're walking down the street or whatever. You can do this at any time. In fact, I've heard a lot of people say that some of the best times for doing meditation is like when they're riding a motorcycle on a mountain, because they're not thinking about what happened yesterday. They're not thinking about what's going to happen tomorrow. They're thinking about right now. That's the only thing they're focused on. And that is the power of presence. And what I invite you to do is, when you're in that power of presence, as Tommy mentioned a moment ago, he kind of slid by this, but feel it. Don't think about it. Feel it. Just notice how you feel in that place. And it's the feeling that's going to tell you the truth of who you are. It isn't the thought. So keep that in mind. And move away from your thoughts, if you can, by just acknowledging them and then just letting them float off into the breeze like another set of clouds or drops of water in the ocean, however you want to see them. Just let them go. Say, thank you. I appreciate that thought. Now I just want to get back to right here, right now. And it's not as hard as you might think. So I would say practice that over the coming week so that you can be fully present when we have our super celebration next week.
Right on. David, so beautifully said. You're so eloquent in the way you explain things for people. And the feeling, to sink into the feeling, because that feeling is much closer to the true you than your thoughts are. If there's like layers to get closer to you, the feeling you have is a closer realization of knowing who you are than the thoughts are. Yeah. The thoughts are part of you too, right? The feeling. And this gets back to discussions David and you and I have had and will continue to have, because we're not really taught how to feel well on this planet. Yeah. We don't really know how to deal with our emotions. So that becomes a scary thing. Yeah. But to truly feel is that's your intuition. To feel is part of your insight. Yeah. That's closer to who you really are, and that's closer, and that's where the answers come. Yeah. And they come in the present moment, exactly, spot on. They only come in the present moment. Yeah. You're not going to find insight and intuition in the future. You're not going to find insight and intuition in the past. That's right. It's only right in the moment. So bringing yourself present, whether it's riding a motorcycle or coming out jeeping with me, or whatever it is that you do that gets you into the moment, and you find some peace and some silence in that moment, boom, everything opens up. Right. And you know, I just want to acknowledge we have a new viewer here. Ted just commented, it's difficult to shut the thinking mind down, and I agree with that. And so I've stopped trying to shut down my thinking mind. I simply stopped. What I do instead is, when I decide that it's time for me to do some meditating, when it's time for me to get present, I allow my thinking mind to do what it's going to do, because I cannot stop it. I don't have the power to do that. At least I haven't figured it out yet. But what I notice is, as I pay attention to the thoughts that are coming up, without giving them any force of attention other than just observation, what I notice is that the thoughts tend to quiet down just on their own. It just quiets down. The more I observe my mind and the thoughts within them, the quieter it gets. It's when I'm not paying attention, when I'm trying to focus on something else and the mind's trying to get my attention, that's when it's really, really hard for me to do it. That's what I've noticed. And I don't know, Tommy, what do you think? Dude, you just explained meditation, the beauty of meditation. And Ted, it's like this. When you observe your thoughts, when you pay attention to your thoughts, like David's saying, just really pay attention to them and watch them for a bit. You're becoming that observer. You're becoming the witness. You're approaching your mind from the place of who you really are, and you're watching your thoughts. They will diminish a little bit, and here's what happens, right? If you've had it up to here with thoughts, which like me and like David, we all do, just watching your thoughts for a bit, they will calm down a little bit, and guess what? It's not like your thoughts are going to shut down, but if you get it from there to here, you got that much space to work with. little bit of space, a little bit of breathing room.
Yeah.
And that's where you're going to start to have some clarity and a little bit of answers and a little bit of connection. So that's what we start with. We start with a little bit of space. That's all it takes. And by thinking, just watching your thoughts, observing them, that's enough. You don't need to quiet your brain. Going from here to the floor, total silence, takes work, takes practice, and it's something that I'm still working and practicing myself.
Yeah.
But you just need a little bit to get going, to see a little clearly, right? Now your eyes are above the surface.
Something you said, Tommy, just, I don't know why it triggered another little metaphor here for me. Most kids, especially young boys, are probably pretty fascinated with things like anthills and stuff like that. I know I certainly was as a kid, and I can remember sitting down and just being fascinated by watching ants going in and out of their anthill and bringing stuff in and taking stuff out, doing what they were doing. And in those moments, in a way, that's kind of like watching your thoughts. Your thoughts are just like ants. They're just going to keep moving around. They're going to go in and out of the anthill. Some of them are going to be persistent. They might come up and bite you because they want your attention. But basically that's what your thoughts are. And so you could just watch them with no energy at all except just curiosity and interest. And that's the most powerful thing that I've done. So that's a great metaphor, I think. So thanks for bringing that up for me.
Thank you, and Ted, there we go. Thanks to your great question, let's leave everyone with this meditation for the week. David, let's copyright it, call it the Anthill Meditation, and just bring that to your mind. Like, imagine the ants are your thoughts, and just watch them, and just do that, and practice that for 5 minutes. Practice the Anthill Meditation for 5 minutes, and see what happens.
Yeah, that'd be fun. All right, everybody, so we've reached the end of our time, and I just want to remind you that next week we are having our 52nd episode grand celebration. So we want you all there, and we want each of you to invite 10 of your friends, and then get them to invite 10 of their friends, because we want to have at least 100 people on this live call. We got a bunch of special guests coming on board, some people who have been on the show before. It's going to be a complete, I won't say cluster anything, but it's going to be a chaotic, fun-filled celebration, and we're just going to have a blast. So I really hope you'll join us next week. And Tommy, do you want to just plug our website one more time?
Yeah, and Ted, because you stood up and you raised your hand, and thanks, brother, for doing that. I love you lots. We've got like 50 episodes out on the website, or 40-something episodes out on the website, and we've talked about how to quiet the mind. We've talked about how to start to take care of the noisy thoughts in our heads. And so you scan, it's a library for you. Scan the headings, and you'll kind of laugh at some of the silly titles we come up with, but they'll make sense to you, and you'll find what you're looking for in there. That's true for anybody at this point. So jump out there. Life Matters TV. Life-Matters-TV.com. Go out there and see what you can find. See what you can do for yourself.
All right. Bye, Tommy.
David, great show. Love you, man. Talk to you later.
And bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.